This house has the only historical marker in Charleston issued by the Preservation Society that mentions the presence of a ghost. Today, we are touring 59 Church Street, or commonly known as the Thomas Rose House. Before we get started, as you can see, it does go down over there. This house is on a third of an acre. There's that historical marker right there, and we're going to get into all of that history underneath. It does talk about that it is on the National Registry of Historic Places, but let's just get into this property, guys. So this is the main house here on the right, and we have a lot to talk about in this house. We're actually going to check out the grounds. There's a pool house. It's kind of hidden. There's 2 apartments, and then we're going to get into the house. We got a lot to go on, but let's talk about this house by the numbers. The house is listed for $12 million. You heard me correctly. There's just $12 million. Here's what $12 million gets you in Charleston. The home is 5,581 square feet. It was built between 1735 and 1740, depending on the accounts where you read. And it is a total of 6 bedrooms, 5 full bathrooms, 2 half bathrooms. It is 3 stories, and it sits on a third of an acre. So we come back here, and we're going to have this pool. It is a covered pool. There's an automatic cover. Wait till we get behind here. There's this little secret garden and a pool house that would make a really cool office, or even a playroom for some kids, like hidden back here, a man cave, she shed, whatever you want. Let me know down in the comments what you would use it for. But since we have nearly 300 years of home history and even more of property history, we're going to get right into that, and then I will break to point out some things as we go through. So before there was ever even a house, it was a lot. Now, the property sits in the original 1680 plan for Charlestown, and this was lot 61. Now, the first recorded owner of this lot was actually a woman named Elizabeth Willis, and she received it in 1680, and she is one of the earliest documented female landholders in the colony. Now, we don't know if she built anything here, if there was anything, but we do know that by 1701, the lot had passed to the Elliott family. Now, a man named Thomas Elliott held it, and he was a planter and merchant, and then when he died, he left it to his daughter, Bueller Elliott. And in 1733, Bueller Elliott married a man named Thomas Rose, hence where this house, the Thomas Rose House, gets its name. Now, he looked at what was standing on the lot and decided it wasn't good enough, so he tore it down and started over. So we know in 1733 something was here, but we don't know what. It just wasn't good enough. So Thomas Rose was an Ashley River planter. He did have land upriver with crops and a working plantation, but like most wealthy Charlestonians in the era, he needed a house in town where he could conduct business, appear in court, attend church, entertain, and overall just be seen. Check out these gardens and this look back at the house. Now we're going to head real quick. We're going to head over here. There is an apartment up on the 2nd floor here, the carriage house, and then another little one below. And the carriage house windows on the bottom are the old carriage doors. They just turned them into windows. It's pretty cool. You'll see that when we get out here. There's a little balcony. We get a good view of the backyard. Okay, so Thomas Rose wanted to build something. He wanted to build something pretty spectacular, and he wrote to his brother in 1734, his brother was in England, with a specific request: send skilled bricklayers. He didn't want carpenters or framers. He wanted bricklayers. Now, at the time, most buildings in Charlestown were still wood, but Rose was building a full masonry structure. Now, that letter, it's one of the earliest pieces of direct evidence for the house's construction. And the house was finished in that 1740-ish era. Before that, that's just kind of what we know. Things get a little hazy when you get all the way back there. Now, the architectural style is Georgian, but it's specifically a double house because it is double wide. So you have 4 rooms per floor arranged symmetrically around the central hall. The Charleston single is the single wide. This was something that was fashionable in the port cities of England at the time, and it was just perfectly balanced. Now, it did not have the piazzas on the side of the house that we saw when we came in. Those were added later in about 1790. We will get to that. And the exterior walls of the home are brick covered in oyster shell stucco, which was a material unique to South Carolina. So the roof was originally slate, and then inside, the finish work was exceptional for that period. There's even a room I'll point out when we get to the 2nd floor. That's one of my favorite rooms in all of Charleston homes, not just this home. It spans the entire width of the home. So shortly after the home was finished, it's November 18th, 1740, and a fire broke out about 2 blocks away at the corner of Broad and Church Street that was catastrophic. Hundreds of buildings were destroyed, but this house survived. And it's believed that the masonry construction almost certainly played a role in why it survived. So when the smoke cleared, the building was still standing. It was surrounded by ruins, and it was already one of the oldest and most substantial structures in the city after it was built. But then shortly after that, the house was passed to the Savage family. Now, they actually held this home for approximately 90 years. And it was defined by the two things that they did. They were the ones that added the porch, and there was actually the front door was along Church Street. So they moved that to that south side where we just came in, and they added those porches, or the piazzas. Now, by this time, the Charleston single was becoming the main kind of structure for Charleston. So they probably got the idea for the porches from those, rearranged the house. But another big change that they added, or not added, but change they made, was they began using the house as a boarding house. And they were renting rooms to respectable tenants, so young professionals that were establishing themselves in the city. Now, this decision could change the course of this property because it would bring in one of the most famous and most tragic figures in Charleston's history, and that is Dr. Joseph Brown Ladd. He was a prodigy. He got his medical license at the age of 19. He was from Newport, Rhode Island, and by 1783, he arrived in Charleston, and he took a room on the second floor. Look at these old original floors here are amazing. And over here, they did add an elevator at some point, not in the 1700s, but you can laugh, that's a joke. Okay, so here's the dining room. When we get into the kitchen after this, so the kitchen where it is now was not where the kitchen it was then, but where you see the living room past that, that's where the kitchen would have been. You're going to see the old fireplace and the hearth fireplace where they cooked and everything back there. It's still there. This house has been just meticulously restored in every sense of the word, and it's insanely detailed. So we turn around, we're going to see this awesome kitchen, and then down that stair there, we're going to get into where you can see the old brick fireplaces and all of that. Okay, so Dr. Ladd, 1783, arrives in Charleston and rents a room on the second floor of this house. He was incredibly skilled, personable, and he genuinely loved his patients. Now, every morning before his paying appointments, he reserved 2 hours to treat the city's poor for free. And people noticed and people talked, and he was just so well respected. But one thing he was constantly known for was his whistling, which is very important to remember in this story. He would whistle as he walked his rounds. Now, the Rose sisters could hear him coming up the street before they could see him. Patients knew he was at the door before he knocked. And people even mentioned it explicitly in writing about him after he died. So he was also a poet and a writer. And by the age of 22, in 1786, he had a book of poems published. He was 22. And that's where this story gets interesting. Now we enter Ralph Isaacs III. He was a Yale-educated lawyer, Charleston resident, and as Ladd's reputation grew, Isaacs grew resentful. Now there was a breaking point that came during a presentation in October of 1786. There was an actress, Miss Robinson, was performing, and Isaacs made an offensive remark, and no one knows the exact words, but they said it was calculated and public, and Ladd responded by striking Isaacs across the face with his cane. We're going to take a quick break. This is that room I was talking about. That is a full-width drawing room. It is a single formal entertaining space. It spans the whole side of the house, the whole front of the house, and it's believed to be the earliest surviving example of this feature in Charleston. I mean, we take a step back, look at just the scale of this room, the tall ceilings, then you can get out onto those piazzas from the side over here. So we'll head out there, it kind of curves around to the side, and then the primary bedroom we can get to from back that way. We're going to head back in the house. Let's get back to Ralph and Dr. Ladd. So after Dr. Ladd struck Isaacs across the face with his cane, what followed was a public war of letters in the Charleston newspapers. Now, Isaacs called Ladd a quack, a social climber, and his exact documented words were, "as blasted a scoundrel as ever disgraced humanity." Now, Ladd responded each time with measured calm, defending his character and his record of service to the city. Then Isaacs issued a formal challenge to a duel. When it comes to the location of the duel, many tour accounts place this duel in Philadelphia Alley. And if you know, there's the ghost story of the Whistling Doctor of Philadelphia Alley, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, however, there's a scholar who's Graham Long. He was a former curator of the Charleston Museum, and he wrote a book specifically on dueling in Charleston. Could find no documentation that any duel was ever actually fought there. And his research suggests that it was more likely the College of Charleston grounds or Hampton Park. But the alley's connection to the story is probably a product of the ghost legend that followed and not the other way around. However, at the duel, Ladd fired first. So it was his right as the challenged party, and he deliberately fired wide. He did not want to kill Ralph Isaacs, and he was hoping Isaacs would see the gesture and allow both men to walk away. Isaacs took careful aim and shot Ladd directly in the knee. Ladd was carried back to the house and to this room on the second floor, and in an era before antibiotics, a shattered knee meant infection. And infection meant a slow death. He lived for 10 more days, and Dr. Joseph Brown Ladd died at 59 Church Street on November 2nd, 1786. He was 22. Not long after he died, people started hearing his whistling on the staircase, in the upper rooms, and even on quiet evenings in the streets nearby, which is probably where the Philadelphia Alley whistling came from. It was the cheerful, familiar tune, but they couldn't quite locate it. And this ghost story has survived for nearly 200 years. And that is when the Preservation Society put their plaque up for the Thomas Rose House, which says it's Thomas Rose's house. But at the end of that historic plaque, it says, in 1786, Dr. Joseph Ladd Brown, not Brown Ladd, there is a typo on it for that, said he was carried to his room in this house after being mortally wounded in a duel, and the last sentence on the plaque is, "It is alleged that his ghost still inhabits the house." So it's more than just a folklore, right? If the Preservation Society of Charleston says so. So let me know in the comments if you believe in ghosts, if you believe this story. I didn't hear any whistling when I was in there, but I also was more concentrated on filming and not paying attention to my surroundings. And kind of all these old houses give me a little eerie feeling, but they're just so cool. So after the Savage family's long tenure, we're in the 19th century, and the Victorian era brought changes, as did most old Charleston homes, with decorative brackets and ornamental trim. The house remained occupied, but its early character was increasingly buried under a century of updates. Then there was the 1886 earthquake, one of the most destructive. I've talked about this a lot. And the house survived as it had survived every other catastrophic event before it. And then in 1929, Albert Simons was hired by the Whitman family to restore the house. He was one of the most consequential figures in American preservation history, Albert Simons. He stripped away the Victorian decorative additions. He restored the missing mantels and artwork. He reconnected the detached kitchen outbuildings. He preserved the original cypress paneling, which was already nearly 200 years old. And the house emerged from Simons's restoration and looked and felt closer to what Thomas Rose had built in the 1730s than it had in decades. In 1970, it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and then in 1972, Luttrell Briggs was hired to design the gardens. And that brings us into the modern era. Thank you so much for watching this tour, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm a local realtor. Shoot me a DM if you're interested in buying or selling anywhere in the Charleston area, or you just want to chat about some old homes. And don't forget to give me a follow here on TikTok. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next tour. This was a good one, wasn't it? Let me know if you believe in ghosts down in the comments.